Hello everybody, it's me. Today, I don't have a green shirt. Sorry about that. I ran out of my green shirts. I have to do some laundry later, so that's what I got planned. I'm missing a sponge. What the heck? Oh, there it is. It's on the ground. A little sponge. Today, I got a couple things planned. Somebody on my last video asked me about Glaze. And so, instead of the object history today, I'll pull up some photos of some of my glazed work, and then I'll show you, and I'll talk about like sort of what I'm thinking about when I'm glazing an object, right? So I got that for you guys today. I don't know if you guys remember, yesterday I was talking about filming that like a fake news thing about breaking news, pottery demon stuff, but I filmed it and I was editing it, and then after I compiled it together, I was like, oh my gosh, it was really, really cringe. So I was just like, you know what, I'm not gonna do it. Sometimes you just gotta fill it and then get halfway through a project to even know that your idea is not gonna work out the way you wanted. So I'm gonna put that one on a hiatus for a little bit. But in the meantime, I got some more pots for you guys. This clay is really, really soft, and so you gotta be careful, because soft clay is usually not fun to throw with, but we'll try our best. I'm already kind of burning through this pot here, so right now I'm just letting my fingers poke out, right? On that interior finger, poke out. Why? What's wrong with my words today? Okay, hold on. I gotta slow down for a second. Okay, so my interior hand is going in, right? And before I do that, I can see that if it's a little bit wide, right? Like when I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, that base that's in the inside here, that's pretty wide. It's like, I don't know, it's about like 5 inches, right? Wide. We don't need it that big. So I'm gonna collar that in. I'm gonna go to the bottom, and I'm gonna push that through, right? And so what am I doing is I'm waiting for that interior finger to sort of poke out where I can slide my other exterior finger underneath, and so I create that little ring. That's all that I'm doing, is I'm just carrying this ring up the pot, right? And when you're working with soft clay, just go slower, right? Because the soft clay is going to want to move and stretch a lot easier, right? But the problem with soft clay is that's not going to have as much integrity, right, to the form. And so you're going to want to go a little bit slower, be a little bit more gentle than if you had like a nice stoneware body where you can, with some grog in there, and you'll kind of put some more weight on it and it'll be okay. Where with this stuff, you kind of have to be really, really gentle, like petting a cat, like a baby kitten, right? Again, I'm going into the bottom, and you also want to be careful when your clay is really soft. You don't want to use too much water. So what am I doing? Instead of just like doing one little drip and then pushing that down the side, I'm going down and up and just double checking that I got that interior all lubricated. Okay, then I'm taking my finger here and I'm going to be pushing down on that outside And like I said, you can do this with a tool if you wanted to trim, right? You could take like this wooden knife and you can just jab that down the side of the clay, and then you will have to trim less, right? And that's always a good practice. Me, like I always say, I use that, its potential. So I'm not going to get rid of it. And again, you always want to go really slow at the base, right? And then as you're going up, you can sort of speed up a little bit, but again, it's soft clay, so we're not gonna do too much. We want to sort of keep it nice, but the reason why we're going soft is the taller and taller we get, right, the longer and longer our pole is going to do, and the more and more we're going to be touching the clay, and the longer we're touching the clay, the higher the chance for inconsistency is going to be, right? And so to reduce that, we're going to go really slow, and so we're really precise with that initial pole there, right? All right, we're going to do one more pole here. So really slow and precise. Some really nice throwing rings on this pot here. So there we go. That's as tall as I think we're going to take this one. And we're actually going to just go right into our roots, our undulation pole. Okay, so that one we're going to have to go a little bit wider. And I'm going to sort of help this one assist in its collapse from the beginning. And that way, it's going to have more support. It's already going to be collapsed on itself before I start pulling it outward. And so that's just going to help me so I don't have to do as much altering the form afterwards there. So there we go. One tree. This clay, I use a little bit less than what I would normally use. Just because I did a bad job cutting up the clay. Like it wasn't precise. So some of them are a little bit larger, some of them are a little bit smaller. And so I'm gonna take that little flange out. And sometimes when you don't, one of my biggest mistakes I usually make with smaller amounts is I try to make those undulations, the roots, and I really got to figure out a good word for that, like the spirally stuff, like whatever the heck those are. I usually try to make those too tall, and I don't give myself enough room, and then I usually have something like a treetop that doesn't really feel full, right? And so I always think that right now I got to do a better job about thinking about what I want this pot to look like. Sometimes I just go for it all the way and I just don't really think too much about it, and that's fine, right? But with this soft clay, I just don't want to have any mess ups, because if you have mess ups with hard clay, you just wait a day, you know, re-wedge it up, wait a day, and you're good to go again. With soft clay, it's just so watery. You have to wait a couple days because you don't want to fast dry, because then it's going to be uneven, like wetness throughout the piece. It's not going to be homogeneous. But yeah, this is pot number 1. So usually I would just wait I don't want to mess up with the soft clay. But there's one. This one's like a very simple little one here. Nothing too special on that one. But you got to have those ones, right? There was a woman, her name is Linda Sanchez, amazing artist. She makes a lot of jewelry, small sculpture, metal worker. She does clay too. But one day she was talking about gold with me, and I was like, imagine if you could just work with all gold, you know, like how cool would that be? And she goes, no, like and basically what she was saying is there's almost like a hierarchy of material, right? And so by just having a small amount of gold, it makes it like have a whole entire different visual language than if something was all gold, right? Having like even a little speck can now make it very, very precious. And so in the same way, sometimes you need to have pots that look normal, because the normal pots are going to put in perspective of what the really, really nice pots and like how important those become because of the normal ones, right? And so she said that to me, and I was like blown away at the time, just because, you know, I just wasn't thinking about that, right? And so hopefully that maybe you guys can take that little knowledge from Linda with whatever whatever if it helps you out, great. If not, then it's whatever, you know. But for me at that time, it blew my mind. So you got to have the normal ones, right? When I'm coning this clay up and down, right, like a lot of it is using your palms of your hand, right? Like you don't want to be using like your fingers, because your fingers are flexible, right? Your fingers are going to move around. So I use like the palm of my hand, because the surface area is a lot large and I don't have as much, like there's not as much variables, right? Your phalanges aren't flanging around, right? And you can have your palms, you have a lot more control of what they're doing, right? And I really think that if you're like new to ceramics, right, just hop on the wheel and just move clay up and down, just like this, right? Try with one hand, right? And then bring it up. A lot of people, they don't go all the way to the wheel head when they're coning something up. Like you want to feel that wheel head scratching your hand as you're going up, right? Oh wow, great. And I'm gonna, this is really, really stretchy clay, right? And it's soft, so it's gonna want to do it's gonna want to really follow your directions, right? Just soft clay is nice because you can really work on your hand positions and not have to worry about pressure. But again, soft clay is also going to limit how high you can go. It's going to limit how high you can go, how much pressure you use, right? I feel like whenever I use soft clay, I have like zero control, right? And so when I use hard clay, I feel like I have like maximum control, maximum height, right? But you have to deal with like pressure a little bit more. So that's why I think a lot of people, when they first start ceramics, they're like, oh, I want to use a soft clay. I want to use a soft clay, right? Because they like the idea of not having to do a lot of work, right, with their hands to manipulate the clay, right? But I think it's really a double-edged sword, because you're not going to be able to create some certain forms that you'd normally be able to create. You know, all these trees today probably aren't going to be that, like, I'm not going to have any stunners, right? Just because the fact that it's so soft, I'm not going to be able to do some crazy stuff with the clay, right? I'm not going to be able to get some, like, really wide thing, or I'm not going to be able to get so tall that it's going to be, come here, sponge. Go underneath here with my finger here. And again, I'm jutting that little ring out. I'm just going to pull that right up. Great. Okay. Top's really thin, so I'm going to compress that a little bit. I got some hair in my mouth. I'm going to collar this in here. You can see how aggressive I'm being with that collar. Alright, well, I'm just going to have fucking hair in my mouth the whole fucking time I'm talking to it. Whatever. Get that shit out of there, dude. It's so annoying. It's only going to get worse until I can get 2 massive braids. It's going to be so cool. Okay, now look. Look at that undulation I got there, right? That's no good. So what am I going to do? First I'm going to lube up that interior a little bit, right? And to get rid of this stuff, right, slow, and then you want to be pushing it outward, right? So you can realign it. And of course, where I realign it right underneath, there's another little thing. Okay, well, we're going to do one of these. And basically what I'm doing is I'm using that palm of my hand almost like a rib. Now it's getting too thin. So I'm going to go underneath of where I'm at, my problem areas. I'm going to collar it in. Look at that. Nice job, guys. Okay. Could probably do one more pull from the bottom, but I got to be careful I don't go too much because the top's going to get wonky again. Also, my forearm's dry and it's touching that rim, so I'm going to get a little bit of water on there so it slides. Oh no 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 no. No 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 no. No. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Alright, whatever. I'm gonna go right into the undulations now if I want to save this pot. It's the problem with like really soft clay. Ugh, it's so obnoxious. Whatever, get some of this water. You could take a rib and compress that, and you might have better luck. But that's just another tool I gotta bring over here, and that's just a waste of time for me. Okay, so go all the way up to the top, go all the way up to the top, go all the way up to the top, go all the way up to the top. Great. And let's get that sort of fall. And I'm just gonna be pushing this outward with one hand here. Taking that finger. I'm not going to go too much outward. I'm probably going to leave it something like this. Maybe I can go do something though. It collapsed in on itself. Take our finger here. We'll try to get that down so it's kind of even. All right. And again, it's an annoying one, but we sort of made it work for us. All right, if you're ever working with really soft clay, always probably a good practice to use a rib, and then you'd compress, like I said, compress that exterior. It's going to make it so you can actually manipulate it a little bit more. and it's not gonna break like what it did for me, right? That's fine. Okay. We'll go on the last one. None of these had enough clay where I could really do a nice little, like, a nice bottom flange on them, so that's a little bit disappointing, but like I said, you kind of have to. The fuck? Is it really caught on my GoPro? The fuck was that? Dude, today is a disaster. I can't fucking talk. I can't make. I don't know, my head's getting stuck on everything. Whatever. But you're always not going to have a perfect day every time you throw, but you can't let it discourage you, right? If you stop, right, then you're not getting any better. So just don't stop. Alrighty. Let's see if we can get one good one out of this one here. The bottom, all the way to the bottom there. Okay, chill out. So I'm going down, I'm scooping up. And whenever I scoop up, I want to make sure my hands are like parallel to each other, right? It's going to help you move. I see a lot of people, like they're trying to cone up the clay from like here with their fingers, right? I can actually, well, you know what I ended up doing? You could see my palm ended up naturally pushing it towards these fingers here. But I see a lot of people just using palms. Like they'll be pushing the clay like this. And that how do I freaking mess up? Hold on. Man, okay. Well, I think I'm just too used to like being in control of the clay where it's hard for me to like fake it now. But they're not, when I see a lot, whenever people are messing up, I always just assume, and if I look at their hands, you can tell that their hands aren't parallel to each other whenever they're touching the clay, right? They'll have their hands at like 11 and 1, right? Or 7 and 8, thinking that that's going to be the way that they're going to center their clay, right? But you need to have them parallel to each other. A lot of people, I think a big problem that they have too is they're going too fast, right? If you really have no control over what you're doing, slow down, right? Feel how you're going to get control. Don't just think that you're going to spin and then all of a sudden it's going to work out for you, right? Like, take a little quick second, calm down. And think about where your hands are at and why they're moving. The clay that way, right? Alright, that's gonna be too much. Alright, come on. Open that up. Make sure we're getting some water in the bottom there. Great. 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 It's thin, so push that down, that flange. And then this time, we're gonna be pretty, go straight up as much as we can. And it's going to allow that clay to sort of collapse in, so it makes it more of a drastic. Oh no. Alright, well, I'm gonna rip it. That's okay. But you get more of a taper in, right? Like, that's important to get that taper. There we go. Stuff out the bottom. At 27, okay. But I guess after this one I will talk to you guys about glaze. Yeah, it's weird today. I'm so bad at my talking. A little bit more sharp with the pulls to get some more movement in their bottom. There we go. There's all three for us. Alrighty, I'm gonna go get the other parts for this. You can see my shoes that I was using to make that news thing. I had like my little suit on and stuff. I thought it was kind of interesting, but it's whatever. Alright, so one. Oh my god, again. Come on, dude, get the off my. Yeah, I think you guys could probably hear it's like one of those little lights that's catching on my GoPro on my head. The second time it happened, it's so weird. Okay. Well, I think since these ones are shorter, I gotta be a little bit more squatted down. I'll be like here, like right over top, like an assassin. Alright guys, that's enough for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. All the best. Strong mentality. It stopped recording, so I couldn't even give you a fist bump. Today's fucked up, man. And my head cam too. Whatever. See you guys in a second. I'm gonna cut to my other stuff. My glaze stuff. Alright, peace. So here we have a Shino glaze, right? And this stuff that's happening on the inside is something called carbon trapping, right? And so when I'm looking at that carbon trapping on the inside there, and I'm seeing that the body of the clay, right? The clay body is shining through on those edges, right? And those edges I sprayed with a red underglaze, and that's underneath of the Shino glaze. And so where it's peaking, it's showing some of that pink right through it, right? And so wherever it's pooling, I think there's more like carbon trapping in those areas, right? So there's an effect that's happening on top of a color, right? And so I thought this was like a really beautiful combination of something that's happening because of the kiln, like the atmosphere of a kiln. So that's a little bit more like random thing, but trying to influence it with like the form, and also getting to play with color in that way as well, right? Where like potters in the past may have not had that same level of interactions that were available to them, right? And so this is kind of like merging like some sort of like traditional like glazing effects with like very subtly like hinting at like modern like access to material, right? And so here's a copper red glaze. And so when I was talking about the gold earlier with Linda earlier in the video here, and she was saying that like gold, right? And so in a small amount can mean a lot, right? And so this is the opposite. Like this is a golden cup, right? But it's just a copper red, but it has that same like that like freaking royal feeling to it, right? It's like this pot is just bleeding. It's like the wine in like a theater show, right? And then we see that paired with like what Linda was saying was like, what if it's like really small? Like what does that mean, right? And so you can also do that same sort of thing. And so this is an old cup, right, that we're looking at right now, this copper red one. And then next we're looking at like this cup that is a like Celadon glazed cup with, look at that, just this tiniest little hint of that copper red, right? I mean, look at that. Like that has a totally different vibe, and it's like there's like this storm, and it's like all this rain, and everything is like crackling around in a radius, and then there's a tornado, right? And maybe that like little red copper red mark is like a house in like the center of the tornado, right? Away from like all the crazing that's happening everywhere else, right? Like look, like that's like what I see when I see these moments. Like it has a totally different tone than the copper red cup, right? And so then I was like thinking about, okay, like I can do this with like weight, like what we did in the copper red cup too. And so then I moved on to cups like this next one right here, which is this one that almost looks, it's a knob handled flower mug, right? And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that weight of that glaze underneath in that shadow, and the light is a lot to influence it too. It has a top down light, so that changes the form a little bit. But look how like just dramatic, right, this glazing looks, right? And so I'm starting to think about too, like, okay, so like weight, right, can have like some sort of effect on the way like a cup like looks and interacts. Like it really changes the form and changes the attitude, right? More than the form. Like it's just adding a little drip, but can, along with the form that's on top of it, right? That it's like it's emphasizing that moment, right? And so that's like what I was trying to do with some of these cups, is like make forms that can emphasize these cool moments in ceramics, right? It's not just a drip on the side of a cup, right? Like it's on this knob that like it's getting hit at light, and there's like drama in the knob. It's very fluid and like guiding you down to almost the fluidity of the drip itself, right? Like the clay feels like it's dripping, especially in that top area there. And so I'm looking at this and I'm get so excited about like, okay, like what's another way we can take this? And I saw that a ripple on the top, wherever it's being pushed down, glaze can pull there in a really cool way. And so this glaze also breaks so nicely on the edges, and it's like a little bit more matte, right? It's a little bit more of a matte glaze, right? And then it goes like really glossy where it's in the dips. Oh my gosh, that blue is just freaking glowing. Okay? Like I get really pumped up about those sort of moments in glaze. And so that's another way. And here we have this like really mysterious cup, right? And there's like a little bit of gold coming out of it there, right? And so this is a lot more of a forced interaction, like really taking like a planned approach, right? It's like lost a lot of the fluidity because it just looks like an object with something that it's trying to like show. It's like they speak such different languages, so it feels like it's just highlighting one moment, right? That knob is totally in a different world than the cup form. And so this one was playing with like how form can be different, like, and you can use a form to highlight another form in something that's on it, right? Whereas like the other ones may have been a little bit more loose, so it looked all harmonious. And so that was another explanation of like what you can do with glaze in a more like practical way. And next, right? Oh, this is really cool. So I took some wax. I usually never use wax, but I was like, okay, like, well, I know when we go to these hot temperatures, that underglaze really starts to flux. And so I was like, holy shit, great. Like, I love the way that looks. Let's just put wax there and fire it to temp, and then I'll spray around that wax, right? And I'll spray what I was been spraying on it to make it glossy, like the matte glaze glossy, like thinning it out because it's a crystal matte, so you can see all those little crystals that form. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I can make it look like it's like acidic. It's like some sort of sickness and like maybe like cells, and it's like attacking something. Like it looks very anxious, this whole like scene, right? Like I saw this and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like scary almost. Like this cup scared me a little bit. So that's like another way of like forcing those interactions of a atmospheric reaction, right? And having it sort of like be a little bit deeper than just the effect, but like adding a little bit extra something to it, right? Adding like this it's almost like a narrative through form, right? Like you really get it, like I'm talking in these moments. Okay, and then next we're going to go back to that initial, well, it's like the ending one here. And so this is the one I saw that I kind of ticked off this whole series of images here. But, and so I had that matte glaze and I added this pink to it, right? Because I was having a hard time getting reduction at this time, right? Like I couldn't get any more like really good reduction firings. And so I was like, well, I need to do some other way. So I took this like iridescent glaze. It's like a high manganese dioxide. And like when I sprayed it over, it brought the radiant red pigment in that matte glaze that I've been using to create those like crystals in those other ones. And so I thought maybe if I sprayed this iridescent glaze, it would do something and make it iridescent. And I think in some moments it does where it gets thick. But what it did more is made that matte glaze, instead of a pink, like this blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy looking. Like I'm really vibing with how that you really see that red underneath of the crystals that are forming in the pink, right? Like you get to see like right underneath that. Maybe it's like making it a little bit more milky, and so that maybe it's like fluxing more there, and so you get to see right through it. And so I'd love to see like what this looks like under like a microscope or something, or something like really close up. But that's like what I'm thinking about this, and so I move on to the next image here, right? And you can see more of that red peeking through. So I look at that, I'm just like totally thinking that there's something cool happening here. And so I've decided on this object I was going to spray on one side more than the others. And so once you get over to the next part here, like this whole side is just like bleeding, right? Like this whole side, it's like, hello, like this is the side I was sprayed at. Like it's showing you the direction that it was interacted with, right? Like if you know like that this I'm spraying, right? And you see it, right? You don't just see it, you also see me spraying it from that direction. Do you get what I mean? Like you get to hang, like you're almost like hanging out with me through the what's happening on the object, right? Through surface, I'm like telling you like where I'm spraying. I know it seems kind of like not an interesting thing, but like to me that's like something that's kind of cool, right? An object is showing you kind of like the body around it, right? So that's happening through form with all those notches. You can see where my fingers were, right? And so you might be able to see like how these things were made, and you might be able to just start imaging or like imagining this as a negative, and my like myself as the positive. I'm creating a negative, right? And so you can start imagining the negative as just that object that you see, and me as the positive aura around it. Like I start to see those spaces in between this object, right? Like I imagine my hand going in this little loop here, in this image here, this close-up image. I see my finger pushing up against the clay and leaving it out on the top to create that little volcano shape on the top, like the top there, right? And it gets so emphasized because there's a little pool of even just like a slightly more radiant red in that deeper part, right? There's like really small moments that in my mind they say so much for like my understanding of this object, right? And then here's just a close-up of like you can see more of the throwing lines. It's like I'm fogging off the glass, you know, saying like, oh, like look at the form. Like you can start imagining where my hands and fingers were during the throwing process, and then it sort of gets erased where it's pink, right? And so like you're really getting control, like what somebody can understand about an object through like how they see it, even like the inside here, like my finger dragging around the edge, right? And so get really excited about these moments in ceramics through glaze. But I just wanted to make sure I gave that. Somebody asked about glaze and like what if I ever glaze the tree forms. I haven't glazed the tree forms, but this is how I'd imagine I'd go about glazing them when I'd get around to it, right? All right, thank you guys so much. Glad I could talk about an object this way with images. So that's kind of cool. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. All the best. Strong mentality. Peace.
So one of my favorite memories was in the summer in my college days. I was doing an RA type thing for summer college, and I was working with another RA, and we were trying to fill balloons to make a fun event for the kids. And we really had fun filling up the balloons with water, laughed a lot, started shooting water at each other. And I think that was one of the days I realized I really liked this person, and now she's my wife.